So we've got a split talk for the next section now, which is on regulation and governance. So again, as part of the sort of theme for today in that development stage, or discover stage rather, of your idea, it is important to consider kind of regulations and governance and certain things that you might need to do, and to go through those processes early on, while you're discovering your idea before you sort of take it further. So we've got two talks for the next section. So we've got some of the digital health innovation managers based at West Midlands AHSM, and also Chris and Joanne from Midlands, who help form our industry gateway, and they talk to a lot of companies and about this sort of thing and offer a lot of advice on that. So we're going to hear from both of them today. Unfortunately, the digital team couldn't be with us today, so I've got a recording of their presentation, which I'm going to play for you, and go through that. And once we've been through that presentation, I'll hand over to Chris and to Joe to talk about their side of things as well. So yeah, I'm really hoping that this one works. I have tried it and it did work fine. So let me make sure I can. Cool. So just let me know if you can or can't hear this okay.
Welcome to our presentation on what is digital, regulation and governance as part of the West Midlands Academic Health Science Network's Entrepreneur Academy. We are the West Midlands Digital Health Innovation Team, part of the West Midlands Academic Health Science Network. To find out more about this presentation, or how we may be able to help you and your digital health innovations requirements, you can find our direct contact details at the end of this presentation. During this 15-minute recorded session, we will be providing you with a high-level overview which will cover, firstly, what is digital innovation, in which we shall take you through problem identification and solution scoping, innovation design, looking at the importance of co-design and stakeholder engagement, and developing technical and functional specifications. We shall then turn our focus onto regulatory and governance requirements you will likely need to be aware of. These will include information governance, general data protection regulation, medical and healthcare products regulatory agency and device classifications, digital technology assessment criteria, open standards and interoperability, digital security protection toolkit, evaluation and clinical trials, patient safety and public and patient involvement, and finally, intellectual property rights. We shall then leave you with a useful resources page where you'll be able to access further resources on many of the topics that we covered during this session.
So what is digital health? Digital health is a broad term that includes both hardware and software solutions, in addition to services. These can include telemedicine, wearable devices, augmented and virtual reality, and advanced analytical techniques using health data. Generally, the term digital health allows health systems to adapt and improve the use of technologies, smart devices, computational analysis techniques such as AI, and communication media to assist clinicians and their patients manage their health. It can also help to promote proactive well-being. Digital health has the potential to give patients agency over their own data and clinical record, and generally improve health literacy.
At the start of any innovation journey, it is vital that you clearly understand the problem that you are seeking to address and give energy and time to scoping the potential solution. This slide will detail a number of areas that you should consider as part of the problem identification stage and solution scoping stage. Firstly, it's extremely helpful to map out the start and end points of the process or the care pathway that you were looking to change. At this stage, a process map can be a powerful tool to understand what happens, when, and by whom. It helps to identify what other changes would need to take place, i.e. people, process, or technology to support your innovation. It also helps to identify other services or people that could be impacted or benefit from the innovation you are seeking to implement. We highly recommend that you contact your service improvement team, who may have expertise in process mapping that will support you in this process. Secondly, use data to quantify the size of the problem. This can be referral data, it can be financial data, time audits, or even complaints. This starts to build a picture as to what the current process looks like, what the pathway looks like, and what the data is telling you is wrong with that process, and sets the baseline upon which any service improvement initiative should rest on. It will also give you a firm understanding of the issues in terms of time, cost, and quality. Thirdly, talk to colleagues. Try to articulate how the problem impacts on their work. Having these conversations can start to bring the problem to life, i.e. do they find a particular process frustrating? Are there repetitive tasks? Speak to service users. Are there complaints from service users on how it feels to currently use a service or currently use a system? Then describe what fix looks like. And this isn't just what fix looks like for you, it's what fix looks like for all stakeholders. Quite often innovation that's implemented can solve one problem for one person, but actually create a problem for another. So we can't underestimate at all the importance of stakeholder engagement and co-design at this stage of the process. Now, it's worth mentioning here that a bad innovation is one where the cost of the solution far outweighs the cost of the problem. If you hit this point, consider alternatives. Often a simple change to a process can have the desired impact of delivering improved services. Another point to look out for is often a problem that you are facing may have already been tackled by another provider or another trust. So it is important to do your research. And the work that you've done previously will help you to identify and go out to market to have conversations to find out, are there other trusts with a similar service that have faced a similar problem and they've resolved it? You can use it at the NHS Futures sites to engage with colleagues, a link of which we provide at the end of this presentation. Or alternatively, explore the Meridian Innovation Exchange for innovators that might be working in this space. You may well have a solution that's just ready to plug and play for the benefit of your service. The key takeouts: fail fast and reevaluate. There is nothing worse when you've invested a lot of time in an idea, you've understood the problem, but the cost of the solution far outweighs, and people continue down this road, wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it becomes very difficult to actually deliver the innovation. Secondly, don't reinvent the wheel. If it's been done by an innovator already, if it has been completed by another trust, then there is a lot of benefit from adopting and adapting an innovation to suit your local needs. All of this provides a groundwork to help you pitch your innovation, to garner further support from your organisation, whether that's your CIO, your chief exec, or service manager.
Okay, so you have now completed your due diligence and you have identified that your digital innovation is an appropriate solution to the problem at hand, and that such an innovation is not currently available in the marketplace. You are now in the creation space of your innovation pipeline. And when using your chosen digital innovation design methodology, it is now worth considering the following. Firstly, the people. Do you have the right people, and are they digitally literate? If you don't have the right people with the right skills to help develop your innovation, you're going to struggle further down the innovation pipeline. It is therefore worth considering a stakeholder mapping exercise. During this exercise, ask yourself who will provide you with the expertise for each stage of the innovation pipeline. For example, who will provide you with expertise on areas such as intellectual property rights, commercialization, clinical trials, funding, product design, product development, IT architecture, and information governance. It is also important to consider who will be impacted by your innovation, such as the patients or citizens, medical colleagues, the administration teams, and/or another clinical service perhaps. It is also worth considering, do you have the right senior representation for this innovation to work from your organisation, such as the sponsorship and backing of your line manager, the Chief Clinical Information Officer, the Clinical Information Officer, and an executive corporate sponsor. You will then need to consider the process. Following your stakeholder mapping exercise, you will then need to understand if the organisation you work for have a clear governance process for how they can support your innovation's development. This would usually be either through your IT department's design council, or possibly through your internal innovation and/or research and development department's internal governance processes. It is worth speaking to these stakeholder leads for these internal departments early on. Remember, you will need to be ready to answer questions such as, how might your innovation impact on current processes? These could be strategic, clinical, operational, and/or IT, as well as other internal and/or external services. For example, if you are working in an ED department and you are looking to develop a new AI software which aims to triage patients accessing your department, who would all the people, services, and departments involved in these operations be, and how would they be affected as a result of this innovation? It is advisable to onboard these affected departments in the project early on. Failure to engage with stakeholders in the creation stages of design can lead to product design and implementation failures or faults further down the line. Remember, almost all innovations require a clinical trial, pilot, or evaluation of some type. Having your research and development department engaged early on will prove useful during this stage. Having all of the right stakeholders onboarded at the beginning of your project will also prove useful in sourcing funding and applying for joint funding application. Finally, you will need to consider the technology. Now that you have got everyone involved in your project, you will need to consider the impact and requirements of the technology within your innovation. You will probably be wondering who's going to be able to help you develop the technology, validate it, regulate it, protect it, and get it to market, whilst making it fit for purpose for the end users. This is particularly important when coming to understand the data holders that you may require for some certain types of digital innovations. The key here is co-design, normally performed alongside your human factors assessment, wherein which you will look at the innovation from the point of view of each of the end users. Co-design relies on having all stakeholders present to enable successful product development along each stage of the innovation pipeline. The NHS and social care providers are not normally set up to provide the end-to-end requirements to develop, bring to market, and commercialise your innovation. So you will need to think about external industries, partners, and academic institutions in supporting you to achieve your innovation becoming a success. The West Midlands Academic Health Science Network is well positioned to support you to foster relationships with academic, industrial, and other market providers to achieve this. We have included some relevant links at the end of this presentation to support you with your initial search.
So you've now completed a lot of the groundwork with regards to your innovation. You clearly understand the problem, and you've scoped the solution, and you've got a good idea of what fix looks like. You also understand the strategic context as to where your innovation fits. The next layer is around functional and technical specifications. For this slide, we'll particularly look at functional specifications. This process describes how a product will work entirely from the user's perspective. It doesn't care about how the thing is implemented, it talks about its features. It specifies screens, menus, dialogues, and so on. Why is this important? A functional specification begins to provide detail that helps with an in-house development, such as letting the developers know what they need to build. It helps to define what stakeholders will be getting from the innovation, and it also acts as a starting point to understand the full requirements of a new system. Not only would this be helpful for all the stakeholders, from the developers to the stakeholders, But this process can also help you to explore the market to find if there's solutions that have already been developed, either by a provider or by an innovator, that meets your full requirements. The process as well will also highlight areas where you will need to invest further resource in terms of developing the innovation to meet all of the stakeholders' requirements. What we recommend is running a workshop of all the stakeholders that are involved in the innovation to map out a full list of functional requirements, i.e. the innovation must, for example, have a single sign-on. It must be able to transfer data from one system to another, or it must be able to send alerts when X, Y, or Z happens. All of these then start to provide enough intelligence for someone as a developer to go away and understand what they need to build and what it will look like. It is worth investing a lot of time in functional specifications, as it allows you to take a much deeper dive and granular level into how your innovation will work in practice.
So now that you are ready to start developing your digital product, there are a number of regulatory frameworks to consider. These can seem overwhelming, but the West Midlands MHRA can provide help and support to talk you through what is required. In this next section, we will break down all of the acronyms you see on the slide. We'll talk you through Medical and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, Information Governance and General Data Protection Regulation, Data Security Protection Toolkit, the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, Evaluation and Clinical Trials around digital products, and finally, Intellectual Property Regulation. Please refer to the final slide if you want any further information about any of these topics.
The Medical and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, otherwise known as the MHRA, is an executive agency of government. The primary aim is to regulate the influx of new medicines and medical devices into the NHS, and providing assurance that these have met applicable standards of safety, quality, and efficacy. A number of innovations will require MHRA approval. However, if your innovation is about developing a new medical device for use with patients, or developing software algorithms that can inform a clinician's decision-making process, MHRA is a must. Equally, if you were developing an app, we would always recommend going through the MHRA approval process. There are supporting organisations like Orca who can support you through this, details of which we provided at the end of the presentation. As an example, the introduction of remote monitoring technologies, which have become heightened over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, require MHRA approval. For example, the medical devices used for capturing diagnostic data, such as digital thermometers, pulse oximeters, and ECGs, would all require MHRA approval. Equally, the software that sits behind all of the medical devices that collects the data and presents this to the clinicians would need MHRA approval, as how the data is displayed and presented and the algorithms for risk stratification all have an impact on how a clinician will make a decision and the care pathway that a patient will subsequently go on. The MHRA have provided a very quick and easy flowchart which you can go through with your innovation to establish whether it would require MHRA approval or not. A link to this is provided on the slide and will also be provided at the end of the presentation.
Another key regulation to consider is information governance. Now, information governance is sometimes seen as a barrier to effective innovation, but it doesn't have to be. So good information governance helps nurses, therapists, doctors, and other staff provide better care for their patients by having better access to the information being used. With information governance, patient records are more accurate and can be used to make trusted, timely patient care decisions. So as I said, information governance can sometimes be viewed as a barrier to the development of digital health technology because of the transfer and storage of patient data. Within an NHS trust, you'll be able to approach your information governance team and they should ask you to complete a data protection impact assessment or a DPIA for your project. The law allows personal data to be shared between those providing care directly to patients, but it protects patients' confidentiality when data about them is used for other purposes. So generally speaking, people within the healthcare system using data for these secondary purposes must only use data that does not identify individual patients unless they have the consent of the patients themselves. This can sound quite complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And again, if you ask your information governance team, they can help you through this. All organisations holding personal information need to meet the General Data Protection Regulations, or GDPR, which came into force on the 25th of May 2018. Broadly speaking, GDPR is intended to bring parts of the commercial sector into line in terms of their use of their customers' data for purposes far beyond what the customer thinks they have consented for.
As part of your innovations research into information governance, you will also need to be aware of the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, known as the DSPT. The DSPT is provided by NHS Digital and is an online self-assessment tool that allows organisations to measure their performance against the National Data Guardian's 10 data security standards. All organisations that have access to NHS patient data and systems must use this toolkit to provide assurance that they are practicing good data security and that personal information is handled correctly. In relation to your innovation when using the DSPT, it is recommended that you think about the people to ensure staff are equipped to handle information respectfully and safely according to the Caldecott principles. Ask yourself, are they digitally literate and equipped to handle information used as part of the innovation? The process, to ensure the organisation proactively prevents data security breaches and responds appropriately to incidences or near misses. Ask yourself, how will your technology integrate in current processes and will it comply? And also ask yourself about the technology. To ensure technology is secure and up to date, ask yourself, is your technology secure? And does it comply with the Caldecott standards? To find out more about the DSPT, see the useful links page at the end of this presentation. It is also recommended to talk over the DSP tool with your IG lead. For any innovation, you will need to consider and access the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria for Health and Social Care, known as DTAC. DTAC was established by NHSX and gives staff, patients and citizens confidence that the digital health tools they use meet health and social care's clinical safety, data protection, technical security, interoperability and usability, and accessibility standards. The DTAC is an extremely valuable tool for innovators to use and brings together legislation and good practice in these areas, and is the new national baseline criteria for digital health technologies entering into the NHS and social care markets. The DTAC is also designed to be used by healthcare organisations to assess suppliers at the point of procurement or as part of a due diligence process to make sure new digital technologies meet health and social care's minimum baseline standards. For developers, it sets out what is expected for entry into the NHS and social care. The assessment criteria is focused on 5 core areas. Area 1, clinical safety, which looks at products which are assessed to ensure that the baseline clinical safety measures are in place and that organisations undertake clinical risk management activities to manage these risks. Area 2, data protection, which looks at products which are assessed to ensure that data protection and privacy is by design and rights of individuals are protected. Area 3, technical assurance, which looks at products which are assessed to ensure that products are secure and stable. Area 4, interoperability, which looks at products which are assessed to ensure that the data is communicated accurately and quickly while staying safe and secure. And finally, Area 5, usability and accessibility, which looks at products which are allocated a conformity rating having been benchmarked against good practice and the NHS service standard. The DTAC includes company information and value proposition sections for context. Each of the scored and assessed sections contain a reference code for each question, the question for the developer to respond to, whether evidence is required and is so the evidence, response options or free text, supporting information and guidance, and scoring criteria. All innovators will need to access and use the DTAC. A link to the DTAC is on the useful link slide at the end of this presentation.
Okay, so now I'll give you a little bit of information about evaluation and clinical trials, as well as patient safety and public patient involvement in evaluating your product. So it's really important to conduct evaluations for digital health products and to involve your stakeholders, patients and the public in all stages of development and refinement of your digital product. However, evaluating a digital product thoroughly is not always conducive to getting your solution to market very quickly. Broadly, there are 4 types of evaluation you can undertake. The first of these, as noted on the slide, is descriptive studies. So these type of studies really work out how things are going with your product. For example, how many people are using it, if they generally like it. This kind of evaluation can be done quite quickly and cheaply using data that you're already collecting. The second type of evaluation study you can undertake are comparative studies. These check whether your product works by comparing them against the alternative. These type of studies can be very robust and can sometimes involve clinical trials. It can be costly and time-consuming. Sometimes, if you're asking patients and collecting patient data, then ethics approval may be required. The third type of study is a qualitative study. So this really gets you to understand how people feel about your product and provides in-depth analysis of people's experience of using it. This type of study can provide a really rich picture of how stakeholders feel about your product. And the final type of evaluation is a health economic study. So this helps you to understand what value for money your product provides and some of the cost implications of implementing it. This type of study basically can check if your product is cost effective. Evaluation of digital product is really useful whether you are developing your product or have already launched it, just to see how things are going. While this evaluation in clinical trials is a separate process to the medical device regulation, certain medical device classifications require a clinical trial, which is the same as a robust comparative study to test the safety and effectiveness of the device. This is detailed further in the slide about medical device regulation. Please refer to the useful link slide at the end of this presentation for links to organisations that assist in evaluating digital health technologies. So intellectual property regulation, or IPR, or sometimes just IP, is important to consider when developing a new service, device, or digital product, including software. This protects ideas of the mind and original ideas. A company called MidTech work on behalf of the NHS to assist companies to understand IPR and protect the IP of products developed. If, following the idea assessment process, it is decided that IP protection would be advisable, then MidTech will work with the trust to obtain the best and most comprehensive kind possible. This may involve registering relevant trademarks, advising on copyright, or applying for patents. Please get in touch with either the West Midlands MHRA or MidTech for more information.
In summary, we've put together a couple of key takeouts for you to consider when looking to deploy or create a digital innovation. The first one, fail fast. It is best to fail fast than waste the time and energy for yourself and also for your colleagues. Don't be afraid to pivot. If through the scoping work and having conversations with your key stakeholders, you identify that there's a far better solution, which is easier, quicker, cheaper to deploy, then don't be afraid to pivot. Key to all of this process is co-design and early stakeholder engagement. Co-design ensures that the solution that you're developing meets the needs of the many, and early stakeholder engagement means that you've got a team that's ready to adopt the innovation when it is fully developed. Outcomes and impacts are key, and use data. The outcomes and impacts are your business case. They help to justify the investment of time and money in the development of your application or digital innovation. And throughout this, always keep an undertone as to what fix looks like and for whom. As stated in the first slide, a problem that is fixed for yourself may create the problem further down the line. The further that you can extend the process and the pathway and understand what it not only means for your organisation, but also for organisations that sit outside of yours, the better. Always be mindful of regulations and guidance such as DTAC, information governance, and DSPT. Quite often you can go through a lot of the innovation process and feel like you've got a product that is ready to be deployed, and then to find out that you will encounter barriers around information governance because these haven't been considered as part of the design process. Finally, if you've got any questions throughout the process, speak to the West Midlands Academic Health Science Network. We have a range of digital healthcare expertise. We also have access to Meridian and industry, and we'll be able to support you along your journey.